So here we are. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, pretty good.
Staying safe.
Of course.
Important. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me okay now? I know I was having a couple of issues earlier with my
You sound great. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, here we are. I guess we'll introduce ourselves just to get the ball rolling. Since I'm talking, I guess I'll start. My name is Scott McClellan. I'm a cinematographer based in Toronto, Canada, and we're here to talk about the mentorship program. I'm joined by Vinit, Borrison as well, and our two people who we have been mentoring, Asmaa and Howard. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. My name is Asmaa, and I work as a grip and a dolly grip, and occasionally an electric or gaffer. And I'm part of the Field of View CSC program, and Vinit's my mentor.
Hey guys. My name is Vinit Borrison. I'm a cinematographer here in Toronto as well. And yeah, as Asmaa said, we've been working together on a few little shoots and doing a bunch of phone calls and talking here and there about all things film.
Cool. I'm Howard Wan. I'm a shooter, cinematographer based in Toronto. I also crew, also AC and operate, and just like being behind the camera, like working. Scott reached out to me. I think I applied for the mentorship program at the end of last year, and Scott reached out to me early this year, and we've been doing a lot of mostly video calls. I had one set visit, which has been really cool, but a lot of video calls in which we're discussing various things, from just like tools, prep, kind of like lighting breakdowns, yeah, all kinds of things.
Fantastic. I think, I'm so happy that the mentorship program has started up this year. It's a funny time for a program like this to start, though. I know we're all sort of facing this pandemic together, and because of that, things aren't normal. And so this process has been a little bit different, I guess, than what I would have imagined it otherwise, because of all that. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that and sort of what we've all been up to. I know that you guys just mentioned a little bit in your intros. Vinit and Asmaa, so you guys have been meeting online mostly, I guess, and chatting?
Yeah, mostly over the phone. And we had one set visit so far. The second one we tried to do so hard this week, but COVID results and really the pandemic was in the way, unfortunately. But yeah, Vinit shares with me a few of his prep documents, and then pictures from sets. And we talk a little bit about his setups and how he approaches things from his perspective.
Do you want to talk about maybe that one job that we did together and some of the questions that you might still be lingering maybe from that shoot we did together?
Yeah, so it was an insurance company commercial with some pretty cool storylines. And I got a chance to get out there and take a look at how he works with his team, his ACs and grip and electrics. And I also spoke to his DIT and colorist, who actually gave me a lot of insight about how he works on his daily job, and then what post looks like for him. But yeah.
Fantastic. Sounds like it was a good experience.
Yeah, it was definitely very educational.
And so was that a one-day shoot, or?
I believe it was a 3-day shoot.
Yeah, it was a 3-day shoot. We ended up talking a little bit about what usually happens going into the job, what kind of documents I get, usually a treatment and some storyboards. And maybe actually I could share those.
Yeah.
I want to get into that.
Sure, awesome. So you can do a screen share, I think.
Yeah, I'm just going to get that email pulled up. 1 second.
Sure.
Yeah, so very early on, I was lucky enough to get the storyboards for this job, and we could kind of break down exactly what we were walking into. It was pretty straightforward. We had one day with green screen and some acting going on inside a kitchen, inside a home, kitchen living room. Sorry, just 1 second here. Okay, here we go. So we can share this. How's that? Everyone see this?
Yep.
Yeah. So these are storyboards that were given to you by the agency or by the director, or why don't you tell us just a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so I received these from the agent, my agent, and basically when I first hear about a job, I mean, they've been very good at sending storyboards and information as much as possible, whether it be a treatment. I got the agency treatment, so the director's treatment still wasn't ready, but we were basically walking into a job where we needed to shoot. This was the first day here. Basically, this will be out soon, so maybe I really, now that I think about it, shouldn't be really sharing these, but I'll quickly go through them. Yeah, so basically we had this house that was going to be flying from a drone that, as you can see underneath the house here, there's some propellers that were for the drone. And this entire spot was going to be, it basically was based around this house flying around, and these two guys, basically the owner of this house and his name, moving, and an easier way to move was to like just fly the entire house to wherever. So obviously we weren't flying a real house around, and there was a bit of green screen business going on. Pretty much this whole spot was on green screen. And I can show you how that turned out. Just give me another quick second.
The boards are great. So you would shoot actors on a stage on green screen, and then the house elements were something that were photographed separately, or were they made completely as CGI, or how did that work?
For this one, it was completely CGI, the house that was going to be shot. So yeah, there were some interesting conversations going on about how we were going to get kind of the wind effect on them, and we wanted some debris flying around to basically try and tie in what they do in post to what we shoot.
So you did the debris practically?
We did the debris practically, yeah. We got a big fan, a Ritter, and we had the production designer bring a bunch of dead leaves, crumpled up paper, and we were going to see what basically would look best on camera.
Awesome. And so you did some tests on the day, sort of found what worked.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Sorry, I'm just trying to jump back into the Zoom here 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I have to stop it and reshare. Here we go. Okay, you guys see this?
Yeah.
You do, yeah.
So here are some stills from the job that we just shot. So we had both a French and English component. Usually that happens in Canadian advertising. We'll shoot everything in English and French. We had 2 sets of actors. And you can see most of these shots are close to what the storyboards are or were. So yeah, we had a fan that was kind of off to the left here, really big fan that was throwing a bunch of debris around. And then we had the wife who's supposed to be, she's sitting on the porch of the house that's flying around. And we developed this little rig that's basically 2x4s on a plastic PVC pipe, 6-inch pipe. And that's our first AD, Michael, and Deb Topping there, who were rolling this lady back and forth on her chair while she was giving some lines. And we also had on the camera side of things, we had a lambda so that we could kind of rotate the camera and give it a bit of extra feel and life.
Wow.
A lambda is like a 3-axis tripod head?
3-axis head, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing that again. So yeah, I mean, you know, we talked about what we were gonna do kind of, and I think Asma and I were looking at the boards before I went on the Tech Scout. So we were just kind of suggesting some possible scenarios that may come up. And then once we scouted it, I was lucky to have her on the jobs because she could see what, you know, what we actually talked about beforehand and then what came to fruition for the actual shoot.
For sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I'm not going to share the other one, unfortunately.
Okay. But
I don't want to get you in trouble.
Yeah, but those are awesome. That looks super interesting. Tell us a little bit more about the process in turn, like, because to me, looking at this just from where I'm sitting, it looks like it's just green screen. So when you guys had scouted the location, are you looking for practical backgrounds? Are you going to sort of find a neighborhood that looks right and then just shoot the elements that have the house with the green screen, or tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. For this particular job, we had a nice, fantastic property by the lake, and that was going to be our house location for the kitchen. So we're usually on jobs where, you know, trying to find locations that can double or triple for 2 or 3 places. So we're not doing complete unit moves. We had a plan devised to shoot everything in the backyard, and because there was a ton of space, it felt like, I don't know, 150 feet like to the lake and 70 feet wide, this property. It was really nuts. So we had a great plan to throw the green screen setup back there. And when we got there on the shoot day, we realized the fan couldn't make it to the back of the house. There was no way that it was getting up a set of stairs and a fenced off area. So we had to quickly change that plan around and shoot it in the front driveway, which worked out really well.
Isn't that classic? It's such a filmmaking thing. That's like best laid plans. I think that's something that Howard and I talked about a little bit as well, just over the course of our conversations, in how important it is to be prepped and be ready, but how so frequently you get up and you get there and all the things that you thought were going to happen get thrown out the window, like as soon as you arrive for whatever reason.
Yeah, I find sometimes that we are like on the fly engineering. You know, as a DP, you have great people and other who are supporting you, like your key grip and your gaffer. But sometimes a plan that we talk about in our heads doesn't really translate to what happens when we actually get there. Sometimes we scout a location and we have a liaison that says everything's okay, and then 3 days later, or the night before the shoot, we realize like there's no way that we have access to something, and all of a sudden we have to come up with a plan, knowing, you know, in the back of our heads what we have with us, because it's already too late to pick up something else.
Right. And so, Asma, you were there for all of that. You got to sort of be a part of that problem solving as well.
Yeah, I was there for the last day. Unfortunately, I was working on the other days. But that was sort of what my main takeaway is, that you kind of have to always be able to adjust. Like, you have storyboards and you have all these plans, but as we saw on that last day, we took like, I think 2 or 3 hours for the first shot. And it's because you have a bunch of different opinions and views, either from the client side or the director, or so just so many factors that you kind of have to just adjust as you go. So you're very much like on the fly, have to have like backup ideas to keep going and to give the clients what they really want.
Absolutely. That's an interesting thing. I think that that's a thing that sort of fluctuates a little bit between narrative and TV and commercial, just the amount of people that you have on set that are offering opinions, or that have valuable opinions that you know, you sort of have to work through. And I think the commercials is one of those things that you have so many more people involved creatively to get details right. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, some of the conversations that were coming up that day were that it was too dark for their liking.
That's a classic as well.
I think everyone's heard that a few
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really, I think one of the things we were hung up at the beginning was I think there was a last minute plan to kind of start with the close up as opposed to shooting a wide. Personally, I don't like working away, but
Yeah.
there was a valid conversation about it. It was a performance-based thing.
Totally.
But yeah, in the end, we ended up scrapping that plan.
Yeah.
Pretty much, what was it, like 45 minutes into the day?
Yeah, exactly. We started exactly how like the storyboards would show like how the progression of the day, but then we sort of have to work backwards and like start from the wide again and then offer different shots to like satisfy the clients.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's an important piece of the puzzle, but that creates a series of sort of like a domino effect of things for your day now as well, right? Like everything you've had scheduled and everything that you've had planned around that sort of gets adjusted because of that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny thing. And so the puzzle changes and yet again, and you have to, figure it out. And so Vinit, now that you guys have sort of made those changes and you're in the front of the house as opposed to the back of the house, you have to, that sounds like it changes the lighting 180 degrees probably as well, did it?
No, luckily for us, we had enough space to kind of keep the lighting the way we wanted. We were like south facing and the sun was basically going from left to right behind us.
Okay.
So it worked out in our favor, but we ended up blocking the entire driveway, the entrance, so no crew could get past while we were shooting. So obviously that, slows things down. And then I think by the second setup, we like pulled the green screen ahead so that people could still get behind it and continue working for the rest of the stuff that we had to shoot that day.
Right.
But yeah, it was, I guess, I don't want to say a typical experience, but yeah, these things happen. Like we're just kind of, you have to react quickly. And at the same time, that there's an enormous crew waiting to do their jobs as well. And so you need to make decisions fast. You need to come up with solutions really quickly. And that was just a classic scenario of what was going down.
No doubt. I think that's good information to be able to relay to people. Like, to me, that's the kind of thing that you probably don't learn as much in school or you learn in reading books. And it's one of those things that sort of comes with experience. I think when you're learning to become a cinematographer, you start, there's so many different ways that you can start, obviously, whether it's school, whether it's self-taught, whether it's coming up through the camera department or whatever. But you learn the basics, you learn how to cover, you learn how to light, you learn this and that. But it's not until you're actually doing the job that you realize that that is really one of the big parts of the job. And it's like problem solving on the day, having your plans get pulled out from underneath you for whatever reason. And sort of being able to make things work, to make things look good, and to deliver what it is the client's looking for, what it is the agency, the director, whoever it is looking for, despite all those hurdles that we sort of have to face day in and day out, I guess, to some degree.
Howard, you should tell us about your shoot, your experience.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of back up real quick and just introduce kind of my part of in the Field of View Mentorship Program. So Scott connected with me at the beginning, I think it was beginning of the year. We had done most of our interactions were done over a video chat, and we were doing a lot of, and now I was doing a lot of watching a lot of his films that he had previously shot, his feature films. We did a lot of like lighting breakdowns, asking him about kind of his philosophy for approaching this project. As well, as Scott has also watched some of my projects as well, offered some of his feedback and thoughts, and kind of positive and negative, or just things that he thought I could maybe improve on, and that was very valuable. Yeah, it was a very good experience in that validated some of the sort of processes that I was kind of going through, and that it made me feel like I was on the right track. And I just maybe needed to do more of it, shoot more. I just seeing how Scott thought, how he worked, it felt like he was tackling the same things I was tackling, but with bigger budgets, more elements, more people, and so on and on. But fundamentally, it felt similar, I think, to how I was approaching things. We had done I was able to do one set visit. Fortunately, Scott was shooting season 4 of a TV show called Slasher. And it was like it wasn't a shooting day, but it was like a prep day. I think mostly art and lighting was doing some kind of prepping. And just seeing him on set, problem solving, as you had said, figuring out potential problems, potential solutions to those problems, anticipating problems, and seeing him interact with every department, the director, art, the gaffer. We're trying to put up some lighting, sort of Astera Titan tubes, I think.
Astera tubes, yeah.
Tubes on kind of seeing how they would mount onto like a certain piece of art in the set, and just troubleshooting that took some time. And it was just good to see him deal with all these types of problems and interact with so many different people, departments on that set. Sorry, I realized I didn't actually answer your question about my own shoots, but just thought I'd kind of give you an overview of my experience with the Field of View program real quick.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, what were some of the questions that you were asking like very early on in meeting Scott?
A lot of it is kind of, how did you choose this project? So I had actually met Scott years ago. We had worked on some like CFC crew, like small projects together. And then, so it was really, and I remembered him from then. He was like very nice. I'm sure, Scott, you get this a lot. And so since then, I think we had worked on, so we hadn't worked together for many years, and it was great to be reconnected with him through this program. And so some of the questions I had asked him was, a lot of it is just like, there's a really cool scene or setup in a film. I wanted to know how this was done. So from lighting to lens choices to filtration to kind of why did you decide to put the camera here and not there? That kind of like lens choices, all these things were, I was learning about a lot of tools that I wasn't familiar with myself, different types of lights, different types of lenses. I think one thing I took away from talking to Scott is a lot of the tools, at least from watching his films, a lot of the tools are simpler than I had thought. And it made me feel like these things are pretty accessible to me as a low budget independent filmmaker myself. I think on one of maybe his first feature, Scott, you had said the biggest light you had is it a 1K, I think, on
I think it was a 1.2 Pro.
1.2. Yeah. And that was kind of maybe a little eye-opening in that I realized that the tools, I could make a feature, I could make a feature at that scale potentially soon. So that was it was inspiring, I guess, to hear all these things.
Well, I'm glad of that. I'm glad that I haven't been just wasting your time every time that we chat.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I think a big part of it too is just like, making it work with what you have. That's always such a big thing. And I think that sometimes bigger budgets and bigger tools and bigger crews just create bigger problems, really. And they slow you down in some ways. And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's not as helpful as you might think it is before that you have a chance to sort of experience it yourself. And I'm glad that you say that affirmation has sort of been a thing with what we've been chatting about, because I think that that's such an important thing in being a DP, and especially on the road early on, because there's so much that you wonder about. I never really had a mentorship when I was young. It just wasn't something that was available at that time. And it was something that I always really wished that I had. And so when this program sort of popped up, I thought, what an amazing opportunity to sort of do or give something where I never had when I was coming up, because I always had so many questions and I always wondered about so many things. And being able to go on set and watch other DPs work was probably, something I rarely had an opportunity to do. I remember a couple of times I was given an opportunity to go shoot like an EPK, behind the scenes stuff on movies or whatever it was. And I would jump at the chance to do it. It would happen very few and far between, but whenever it did, you go and kind of do your job as best as you could. But the whole time, you just sort of be working over here in your EPK and watching the DP work the entire time, just sort of trying to figure out how they do stuff and what they do and the language they use and the way that they sort of treat a day and prepare for the next thing coming in that day. And you sort of realize very quickly how important that is too, in terms of getting your day, in terms of working ahead and seeing people work. I think it answers a lot of the questions that you probably have. But it's nice to be able to chat with people too and just sort of like realize that the things you think about and the things that you wonder about or the things that you want to do aren't entirely crazy. I think that having support is so important. And becoming a DP, I think, is sort of a long road. And I think it's a little bit different for everybody, obviously, but depending on where you come from and what your path ends up being. But certainly it's been a long road for me. And I think in many ways, it's been a lonely road in many ways too. And so to have somebody else that you can sort of chat with, or any other people that you can chat with and sort of be encouraged by and be validated by is like, seems like a good thing for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I feel very much the same, Scott. Like back in my day, there wasn't really a mentorship program per se. I think one of my first opportunities was I met Peter James, who was shooting a movie in town at a CSC event, funny enough. I was still in school or just finishing school. I was up for an award, a nomination. I think it was in the student film category. And anyways, he was working on a massive film with like Vin Diesel, who was in town at the time. And I mean, I jumped at the opportunity. It wasn't going to be like an official thing by any means, but he said, just come out to set and hang out and be a fly on the wall and watch. And it was super intimidating. Like it was just like the craziest shoot with like hundreds of people all over the place on a studio or on location. And you don't want to get in anyone's way and you don't want to ask the wrong questions and you don't want to look like a tool, but it was beautiful. Like, I mean, I was able to, just sit and watch, and he was pretty busy during the days, but I could text him at night with a bunch of questions, and he'd hit me back, and it was kind of my first and only experience. But, that being said, I think that like a mentorship program doesn't necessarily need to be defined. Like a lot of people that I learned from were my peers in film and other technicians that when I started PAing and as I was getting on more and more shoots, I'd really just very much like Scott, be watching and trying to squeeze my question in whenever I could. But the great thing is that maybe it's not the DP that you're talking to, but there's so many people around him that are supporting his vision or her vision. And like even just picking the brains of, the electric crew and the grip department and any other department, camera as well. It was fantastic. It was just like, you carry a little piece of information from each of those shoots and it just like stays ingrained up here and you kind of take it to your next job or your, the next thing that's similar to that style of shooting.
For sure.
Most definitely. It's true. The education of being a cinematographer, I feel like, is one of those things that just never ends, isn't it? It's like you're always, especially the way things are going now. Like technologies are changing, lighting technologies are changing. There was when cameras were like changing super rapidly, and I feel like that's kind of like flattened out a little bit now. And I mean, it's still happening, but it's not happening at the pace that it was when digital sort of first sparked. But now it feels like, lighting technology is kind of that next big thing that's suddenly spiking and changing. So even if it's just the technologies, but it's also, I think, techniques, and it's also ways of doing things. And that's the great thing about this job, is that there's so many ways to crack an egg, and you can just always be learning new, more efficient or more whatever ways of doing things, which is awesome. I know that I feel like everything that I do still, it's like you walk away having learned something new, which is great.
There's a question in the chat. I'll just pass along here. It's someone's asking that they're at a loss with their career path. They said they majored in film production in college. They PA'd, worked in rental houses and so on, but they haven't gotten really far with learning how to DP. How could I learn the craft is the question. Do you guys have any suggestions?
I think the biggest lesson I've gotten so far is to try to do it yourself. Like whatever equipment you have available to you, ask whoever can help, and just try to shoot something yourself, like however small it is. And then see what the problems that come up with that, like whether it's reflections or, you're shooting it at a higher ISO, or you're trying to minimize grain or something, and just try to solve those issues for yourself. Because that's ultimately what the job is later on, is that, yes, no matter how much you try to learn and ask questions and all that stuff, it's great, but also like doing it and trying to solve problems that are created naturally from the job is something that you kind of have to just figure out on your own and do as much research as you can. And there's so many online tutorials now, and I mean, even if you can get yourself on set as a PA, I think it's a great idea to talk to everybody, like we said, from other crews, whether it's camera or grip or electrics or even art, and just try to find your foot in somewhere there. And people, I find, are very, very happy to help and very happy to show you like how they do things. And I think a lot of people also take pride in how they figured out how to, get their own foot in this industry. So I think everybody's story is different, and it's definitely going to be different for you. But it's just a matter of keeping at it. And I think in terms of DPing, I think it's worthwhile learning to light, even if it's just like one source of light at a time, or if you're just bouncing light around and trying to figure out what works best for the shot. So that's sort of what I'm kind of doing, because I'm trying to bridge my skills from lighting departments to camera. So I think it's worthwhile to just create situations for yourself and then try to figure it out.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really good answer for sure. It's a good question. It's one of those questions that I think everybody thinks a lot about when they're starting out. And I think that's good advice, Asmaa, for sure. Like you said, everybody's road is different. It's not like becoming a dentist or becoming a lawyer or whatever. You don't do this certain path and you're going to land in this specific spot. It's, it's a creative industry. And I think that you kind of need to be creative in terms of figuring out your own path on how to get there. But perseverance, I think, is like the number one thing for sure. It can be super discouraging, and it can be tiring, and it can feel like you're just treading water and not making any progress for long periods of time. But I think that, as long as you're persistent, ultimately it does pay off. And when you're doing things, people do notice, whether regardless of what stage of that path I think that you're on. I think, people sometimes when you don't think anybody's looking, there are people that are looking, and people are noticing, and people might maybe remembering you for things that you've done when you think that there's nobody out there. And so, early on, for sure, I think no matter what, every single day you should do at least, I said this to Howard the other week as well. I think every single day you should try and do at least one thing that puts you a little bit forward, whether it's a small thing or if it's a big thing. You know, some days you'll spend your entire day doing, you know, something, or entire week. And other days, maybe it's sending an email, or maybe it's just like updating a thing, or whatever. But I think as long as like every single day you pick away at it to some degree, you are going to make progress. And things are different now than probably when Vinit and I started out too, in that, you know, there's so many avenues that you can take to make content. It's a tricky thing being a cinematographer, because it's not like being a painter, and it's not like being a photographer, or it's not like any other discipline where you just make art by yourself. It requires at some level an enormous amount of people and preparation and money and, you know, resources to create our art in ways. And that can be daunting and that can be discouraging. But nowadays, you know, even with your phone, you can make video, and cameras are so much easier to get your hands on. And I think with things like TikTok and Instagram and whatever, you can start making content that people might start noticing. You don't need to be shooting short films, and you don't need to be shooting commercials or whatever it is. You could be home waiting for the sun to come around in a window that you know is going to happen, that looks great, and make a, you know, a 10-second video, or make a thing, and then start piecing things together, and just start making content and showing people that you understand cinematic language and understand lighting and understand composition and that kind of thing. And maybe that will lead to bigger things. Maybe that will lead to helping you shoot a short film, or that will lead to getting a commercial or a documentary or a feature, depending on what sort of level you're at, or position you're at on the path. But I think that that's kind of the thing. Just make stuff, even shooting photographs, as it, you know, and playing around with them, coming home and playing around with them, shooting video and coming home and playing around with it. It's all very enlightening, and it's stuff that you can learn from. If you just go out and wander your neighborhood and shoot photographs all day, you'll learn, you know, what looks good and what doesn't look good, what you like. And I think that's an important thing too, and what sort of your eye responds to, and how things work, and how things look different at different times of day, or whatever. And that's all stuff that you can kind of put in your pocket and take away as like a learning process.
Yeah, that's a very good answer, Scott. Like, I'm almost at a loss. Like, that was almost perfect. Some of the best advice that was given to me in my early days was just to get a camera and shoot anything. If you're not a DP yet, shoot anything. Just make content. And Scott's right. Like, eventually, you might think that you're treading water, and going nowhere, but people do take notice. I mean, practice makes perfect. You know, trying different things with the same setup, for example, showing 4 or 5 different looks that you can, you know, set up on a tabletop inside your home, and like a very small little lighting kit. There's a lot of ways to make content now, and yeah, cameras are super accessible. You know, there's so many great tools out there. Don't feel like you need the latest and greatest piece of gear to create something that feels cinematic. Believe it or not, we're using off-the-shelf prosumer cameras on really enormous shoots in this day and age. Like, they just are a part of the process. So, you know, you may not notice it after it's all been colored and edited together, but you can really make some beautiful stuff with very little these days.
Most definitely. It's a lot of fun to hear story. And I think that's encouraging too, you know, when you hear stories of these big shoots and they're just using things that you would never think that are something that a big show would use. It's a prosumer thing. It's a small little thing. It's whatever. Because I think that it makes you realize that it's like, oh, wow, I have access to the same thing that these guys have access to. Like, they made this look good, then certainly, you know, maybe I can make it look good with the same tools too.
For sure.
100%. We have another question coming in. The question is, what is one specific thing, Asmaa and Howard, that you've taken away with your time with your mentors? Also, will you pass the torch and start mentoring yourselves?
Howard, do you want to go for this one?
Sure, yeah. So I mean, there's one thing there's so many things.
So many, yeah.
One, let me think. One interesting trick. This is like a specific lighting thing that I learned. I guess Scott, I'm gonna give away this secret or whatever. I don't know if it's a secret. So it's a little technique that I didn't know. Maybe it might be a well-known thing, but where Scott would use a hard kind of light, typically like a sunlight kind of thing, a daylight kind of source, like a 1.2, and use that to key a character or subject, but then use a 4x frame to soften off that source on the face so that it's not as very hard. You get a hard hit on like the person's body or shirt or something, but not their face, so that remains soft. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of ways that you could do that too, I think, but that's something that I like to use. And, you can use different flavors of diffusion to sort of create different softnesses. And I think that depends on the look that you're going for, the mood of the scene that you're shooting, the actor's face, their age is kind of like always a big one as well. But you can, the fun thing about being in DP is like inventing light. I think it's important to sort of create something that looks realistic and base it off of something that makes sense in the location or in the scene, but you can really stretch the reality of what it is when you're doing that. And, I think that's a lot of fun for sure.
Totally. And the second part of that question is, would you pass the torch and start mentoring yourselves? I think that's definitely a very important part of the industry in general and in any job in the industry. And I would definitely start mentoring. Like even now, a few PAs have talked to me about, how they would, how to go about becoming a grip or an electric or a key or a gaffer. And I always say I would say just offer anytime you have, like come on set and learn the stuff. I know in grip and electric world, there's a lot of like things that have like very specific names that don't make any sense to the normal people. And a lot of the time it's about learning the gear and seeing what you can do about it and what you can do with it and what you can come up with. So definitely, I think everybody should have that that will to teach other people that are always interested. And I mean, we're not going to be here all the time. And I think it's a good idea to always pass on what you've learned.
To answer the second part of that question, I'd be interested in mentoring. I guess it's funny for me because I feel like I'm still learning, and maybe everyone feels this way probably constantly. There's some aspect of, for me anyway, some kind of I'm blanking on the term now. Imposter syndrome, I think, a little bit, where I've learned some stuff, but I don't feel like I learned that. I don't feel like I know that much, so it feels weird to put myself in that position. But there's probably something that I've learned over the years that I can probably impart on someone else. So I'm open to that. I haven't really thought about that until very recently, but sure, yeah, I'm open to it.
Don't sell yourself short, Howard. There's lots that you can share with people for sure. I mean, I feel the same way when I started this. I was like, Jesus, does anybody want to learn anything from me? Like, am I just going to go out there and teach bad habits to people? Hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah.
Christina is saying in the chat, the best way to learn is to teach too. I agree with that. I think it's good. It's Howard, I feel like I'm learning from you too. It's like already, and having these conversations together, I think is super enlightening as well. It's like, it's a great way, these conversations that we've been having, I feel like is a great way to just sort of think back on your work and think back on decisions that you've made, and to look at your work and to look at decisions that you've made. And it's a nice time to reflect on stuff. And I think that's helpful too, but seeing the way that you do things too, Howard, I think is very enlightening. And, it's been a great process. I got to say that I've learned a lot from this too. It's not just rewarding, but it is enlightening for sure.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Do you guys, Scott, so you have seen like, or how have you helped Howard kind of approach a job or a project that he was working on? Was it strictly from like the DP's kind of perspective, or is it like encompassing kind of other aspects of like what goes on in a normal shoot?
Geez, Howard, maybe you can answer this question better. We talk a lot about philosophies and approaching things as a DP. We talk about prep a lot, just sort of in general, and I think that prep is probably like one of the, you know, a very, very important piece of all of this. But I guess it's mostly probably from a DP's perspective. Howard, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, since the mentorship program started, I've like shot 2 kind of small projects, so I haven't been super busy right now. Partly just trying to stay safe with the pandemic and whatnot. But a lot of it was kind of looking back on some of the kind of screening some of the previous films that I've shot, projects that I've shot, and getting feedback was like a valuable process. Just a lot of it just looking at setups and kind of like thinking if I was in this position, if I was on this film that Scott was shooting, I was a DP for some reason, and I were to have to shoot this, how would I approach it? And contrast that with how Scott ended up approaching it in this film. Yeah, I do feel like we have somewhat similar styles in terms of, I think probably we err on the side of naturalism. I don't know if that's a fair characterization.
Yeah, I take it.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Not that I don't obviously, I appreciate the experience with Scott, but it'd be very interesting for me to talk to a DP that has like a very different style than myself, to see like maybe he would do all the different things, all the opposite things that I would do, and kind of seeing the mentality or the rationale behind why that DP would make those decisions. Yeah, just be interesting to talk to different people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking about prep, I wonder if we should share some other stuff that we've kind of done in the past, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at stuff is fun. Sorry, we have one more question coming in before we do that. This is from Richard. Do you as mentors go beyond your own techniques and deconstruct others' work? I guess we've done a little bit of that. We haven't done a ton of it though, I guess, really, have we, Howard? We've sort of chatted about some movies and chatted about some looks and things, but we haven't really gotten into deconstructing stuff in detail.
It's been mostly stuff that either I've worked on or you've worked on personally. Yeah.
And what about you two?
Yeah, it's kind of been around my work as well. So like, I guess we haven't really talked about anyone else just yet. We should do that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, yeah. It's interesting because it's like, it's hard to, it's nice to talk about what works and what doesn't work and what we like about other people's work. I think that Howard and I maybe have been more focused on our own work because we can speak to that in more detail and we know sort of the stories behind it and the techniques and why and hows. But yeah, absolutely. It's always good to look at other people's work. I think no matter what, it's super inspiring. It's important to look at work and sort of decide for yourself. I think that it shapes your own work in so many ways, and deciding what you like and what you don't like and what speaks to you and the things that you sort of gravitate to naturally. And then it's nice to look at all of that stuff as a whole and sort of figure out you know, how that shapes you and your style and what you and your style is. It's a funny thing, you know, it's something that I think a lot about as a cinematographer, is personal style. And the big part of me wants to be as versatile as you possibly can, because then you're that much more hireable for whatever project comes along. You can do glossy commercial stuff, you can do realism, you can do documentary, you can do whatever it is that's needed. And I think that that's important, but at the same time, it's important to have a style too, and to have your work sort of speak for you in ways. And it's an interesting balance, you know, but I think that your style will come out naturally if it's not something that you necessarily focus too much on. I think, like I said, finding work that you like and the things that resonate with you, I think end up sort of going in and sort of getting mulched around and coming out in their own organic way. But that goes, I think, for not just looking at other people's cinematography work, but looking at all kinds of art and life and just, you know, everything ends up being sort of a sieve for what you end up churning out ultimately at the end of the day, I suppose.
For sure. And have either of you guys been hired for a specific style that you have or that you sort of have a lot of experience in?
Vinit, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very much like what Scott was saying. I want to be versatile, and I don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed to one category or genre of things.
Okay.
And I think that just keeps our mind a little bit fresh too, like just taking a different approach or adding your own unique flavor to something.
Mhm.
So it's just not something that's easily forgotten when it hits the air or
Right.
when it gets projected on a screen. As a cinematographer, I think you want to have some of your work remembered. Like a lot of time and energy and thought goes into these projects, and we want to bring the best we can to the table. Yeah, I mean, I'd say, like certain work has influenced some of my style, and and I think once you're established, yes, you're getting hired for your past projects and the past things you did, but more than just that, like filmmaking is a very strenuous process where there's a lot of ideas and people and things that are changing all the time, and a big part of the job of being a DP is like trying to maintain some calmness and keep the entire train moving.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think it's a combination of both your style, but also how you can like manage a crew and run a film set.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that that's a super important thing as well. It's also a very good segue to our next question, which is, how do you deal with a situation where you and the director aren't seeing eye to eye on a scene? Which is, I think, an excellent question. And it's a tough thing. I think it looks like I see a fire in your eyes, Vinit, when I...
Oh man, am I gonna get hired again after I...
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. It's a very good question, and it's a very tough question to answer. And I think that probably most people have different philosophies on that as well.
Yeah.
And there is, and maybe that being said, there is no right answer. I mean, I'll say quickly first that, at the end of the day, I do a lot of narrative stuff. And so when it comes to that specifically, at the end of the day, it's often the director's project, and you're there to make the director's vision come to life. And if you can, the best thing that you can do is elevate that vision and make it better than they've ever seen it, And so I think it's really, really important to have an objective view of it all while you're doing it. You come into places with these ideas and the things that you really, really want. And sometimes it's just not what's right. It's not what the director sees. And you have to be willing to be able to bend to that and say, okay. And I think okay, I'll change it. Okay, we won't make it that different. You make it the way that I first saw it, because it's not what's right for the project. And I think that that's the most important thing, but that being said, you want to have a relationship with your directors. And I think that every director that you work with is a different relationship. But like any relationship, I think that communication is the most important thing, and being able to communicate with each other positively is probably the most important thing. Because as long as you communicate with that person and you do it in a respectful and positive way, this doesn't happen so often. It becomes a very fluid and very organic and very creative process. where then you both learn to trust each other. And so I think that being versatile also comes into play there too, because you don't want to be a one-trick pony that's only going to bring this to that, and then it isn't right, and now you're fighting with the director. Now you can change and do it a different way. And so it's great to be challenged by directors, and it's great to not necessarily always see eye to eye, because it forces you to do things that you might not otherwise do, or consider things in a way that you might not otherwise consider it. When it gets really tricky is that when you know that maybe they're making the wrong choice. But depending on what type of project it is, sometimes you just have to stand back and let that happen, because you're sort of there. You're hired to sort of do a certain job, and sometimes you can't cross that line. You know, the director does have the final say, or the agency has the final say, or whoever. But I feel like I could ramble about that all day. It is a tricky question to answer. Vinit, do you have opinions on that?
Yeah, no, I work primarily in advertising, so there's a lot of opinions, because there's an agency involved, and that's usually a group of people that have been working on the project well before you've even been hired. And so they've had a number of conversations with their client, and have provided a bunch of references on the way they see it coming to life. And then a director's brought in, and then also the rest of the production crew, DP, etc. So there's a lot of opinions that happen on my types of jobs, and 9 times out of 10, like, and Scott's right, like it's the director that's kind of running the show. It's their project, and we're there to make their vision come true. Sometimes if I feel strongly about something, I've asked if we can shoot it both ways, if we can shoot it their way and then my way. And usually I just let their way, completely get out of the way, finished exactly the way they want it, and then I'll offer a take or two of something that I want to bring to the table.
That's a really good way of doing things, I think, for sure. I'll do that too. Time is sort of tricky sometimes to do that, but sometimes it's, you realize when you allow them to do it that way, so sometimes they realize, oh, maybe this isn't the best way after all. Sometimes.
Yeah, no, sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's just things that you can't articulate in words, and as a DP, you're more comfortable behind the lens and talking through that language. And so I think, you're not always going to have the right way of explaining something to a director, but you could show them something and be like, I'm thinking like this. And at times when it's, like when we're really struggling for getting a day done, and there's not really going to be an opportunity to show my vision, I'll just whip out my iPhone and Artemis, or like shoot a little video of exactly how I see the camera moving or where I want to point it. And that way it's a very, framed in picture for someone to look at and be like, okay, I get it now. And then we can choose to, continue working whichever way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of doing things. That's worked for me in the past as well. I was doing a movie where we had a location chosen somewhere very far away for a scene that we wanted to do. And we were in another location shooting something entirely different, when across the street, I spotted a place that I thought was going to be better. And so I didn't say anything about it to anybody. And I thought to myself, I think that this looks better. I think this is going to work for us. Visually, it's going to be more impressive. But the great thing about it is it's a place we already are. And the day was following that we were supposed to move to this other location to shoot there. And so I could now save us a location move as well and buy us more time shooting. So I went and I shot a few photos on my phone, and then I brought them into like Snapseed, which is just an app that I use for editing photos, and colored them and cropped them into the aspect ratio that we were shooting. And then I brought them to the director and said, hey, man, what about this? And I explained it a little bit first, and then I showed him the pictures. And once I showed him the pictures, he went, oh, yeah, okay, cool. I love it. It's way better. So
Very cool.
a question that I have kind of on the topic of not seeing eye to eye with a director. Have either of you ever walked away from a project because you really felt like your vision was fairly, like in prep, and when the director approaches you with a script or something, and you felt like your vision wasn't compatible with the director's vision? Do you ever say, this is not my thing, someone else is better served at creating this project or kind of executing your vision?
Vinit, you want to go first?
Yeah, I could talk to that a little bit. I'd say, I mean, that doesn't really happen that often. I enjoy the challenge of kind of, you know, hearing what a director has in their mind for executing their vision, and then trying to add a little bit of my flair to it. If I'm struggling to think back, but but there has been a time where, yeah, there just was a certain director that like had bought a camera and was like forcing it upon us for the movie to make the budget work, and it really wasn't going to be a great tool, because I know what production needs, and that's usually, you know, like sending video out to multiple departments, and like having long battery life, and being able to put really great lenses on a body. So that was maybe one time where I was like, okay, yeah, you know, maybe there's someone else for this project. But yeah, it's usually, it's rare. And nowadays I'm finding, you know, in this day and age, like the challenges are like trying to take a new tool, whether that be a new camera body. You know, I say that now because like cameras have finally gotten to the place where most of them, you know, have a log option, and being able to like color correct them and tweak them afterwards is way easier than it ever was before. So I'm enjoying this new world of like bringing new technology to jobs, and trying to create things a little bit differently than they've always been done before. I hope that answers some of that.
That's a great answer. We have another question coming in for Asmaa and Howard. You're still bouncing between gripping, AC, and DPing full time. Have you also learned anything from your mentors how to communicate and work with DPs in these positions?
Yeah, for sure. I can start on this one. I definitely still work as a grip and a gaffer. And I've been lucky enough to be able to step away from long format for a little bit, so I can do the DP work on the side and try to kind of shoot my own stuff and learn from it that way. One big thing that kind of works for me right now as a key or gaffer is having those conversations with the DP before the job starts, and sort of have a say in deciding what equipment will be best for what we're trying to achieve, and just really try to figure out what you can bring to the job that, you know, will obviously make the vision better. But I think we all kind of have to do that, like bounce between both jobs and sort of keep both sides alive. One thing that I've learned from my journey so far is that if you are trying to learn a little bit of lighting and kind of build your career that way, to also be shooting on the side and kind of like work simultaneously in those two fields, so that one informs the other and vice versa. And I think that's really important to kind of figure out how to keep that alive. Because I know like it's hard to say no to money when it comes, and me and Vinny were talking about it a little bit this morning. You know, when you have a longer project and you're working 5 days a week and it's 14-hour days every day, it's impossible to kind of think about anything else at that point. Like your weekends are basically to rest and recharge for the next week. But I think it's a good idea to try to take breaks from those longer format jobs to be able to practice your own craft and learn more.
Yeah, very well said.
Absolutely.
Well, that's exactly it. I think there's always going to be this transitional time in your life where you're, you want to become a DP, but you're still doing other side things. And I mean, I did it. I know a lot of my peers did it. I think the best way to learn anything on a film set is to like PA first. You have to start at the bottom, look and watch, pay attention, and you're asking questions all the time, and you're learning from all these different jobs. And so, like, 1 minute Asma could be watching me work and seeing something or seeing a process that I've taken to bring something to the table, which is different than anything else that she's seen before. And she takes it back to her gripping position and, implements it on one of her jobs because it was like faster or whatever. And so it's, I think you're collaborating, and you're to this day, I'm doing it too, still learning from people, still talking about approaches with other DPs, other directors from, their experience working with other DPs on certain projects. You're constantly learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and can I add just one more thing? I think it's also it takes a lot of humbling to sort of take a step back and know that you're never going to know everything. And that's where the constantly learning aspect comes into play, because there will always be new technology. There will always be things changing. So you're never quite at 100%. And it's always like a good place to like always be asking questions and always trying to, do a little bit every day to get better or to move ahead.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think as to what you were saying earlier as well, like I think being willing to reach out to people is a really important thing. And you'll probably find that people are much more friendly and willing to share information that they have and experiences and than you think that they might be. I know certainly when I moved to Toronto and wanted to have a career in film, I was very intimidated by the whole industry and by reaching out to people, and so didn't for a long time. And it's a regret that I have. And even still now, I don't like reaching out to people to ask them of things too often. But whenever I do, it's always fine. It's always great. You find that people are very friendly and very willing to share knowledge and help. And so don't be afraid to reach out to people to ask. It's it's the classic thing of like the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and you just do it, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised and rewarded for it, I think.
For sure. And I think another thing too is to just tell people what you really want to do. Like, yeah, you can be a PA or a grip or an electric or whatever, and you want to shoot. Just tell people that. Like whatever DPs you work with, or either smaller or bigger jobs. I've told a number of DPs that I work with on smaller jobs that I want to shoot, and they're like, well, there's always like some jobs that I can't take. They're too low budget for me or whatever reason. So they'll pass along that job to somebody who's starting out and who's trying to build a reel. So just tell everybody what you want to do, and eventually it sort of comes back to you, right? And I think everybody in the industry kind of had a similar experience in that.
Most definitely. Yeah.
Be nice to everyone, because one day they can be your boss.
That's
Yeah,
right.
totally.
Good advice.
Or just be nice, because it's the right thing to do.
Totally.
Yeah,
Very true.
it's so true. Yeah, it's so true.
Scott, you were going to share something, and we got sidetracked a little bit.
Yeah, well, I got all kinds of stuff that we could show. That's probably not that interesting. I don't know. I had prepped some stuff just thinking about prep and ways that I approach projects, because I know that that's one of the big questions that comes up a lot, is like the things that you do to prep a project, and sort of what's important to focus on and what's important not to focus on. So I have some stills that I could share just of storyboards and things like that. One of the things that Howard and I talk a lot about is just prepping projects and different ways that you can do different things. Personally, I do a lot of storyboarding myself, and I really enjoy storyboarding myself. It's great to work with storyboard artists as well. And certainly being a DP doesn't mean that you have to be able to storyboard or be able to draw. But when I am doing long format stuff, especially, I find it helps quite a bit in terms of visualizing what things are going to look like. And to what you were saying earlier, Vinit, as well, it's like showing things to people is a lot of the time the best way to communicate any idea. One, because we are visual people and it's easier than sometimes describing things. But two, I think it's important because when you describe something to somebody, that person that you're describing it to can visualize it in like 16 different ways, and it might not be, no matter how articulate you are about it, exactly what you have in your mind or what you're describing. But as soon as you can show something tangible, then it becomes clear, and then you really have a really good stepping off point to build from. You can look at framing, you can look at composition, you can look at quality and color of light and things like that, and then decide how to tweak it or how to change it, or if it's already right for things. So when prepping projects, that's something I like to do a lot of, especially location scouting. You know, prep is so important. We were talking about earlier how sometimes you arrive on set and everything that you have planned goes out the window as soon as you step out of the car. But that being said, you have to be prepared. And even if everything falls apart, the more prepared that you are, the better off that you're going to be. I think that a lot of what you prep, even if it does change on the day, still translates in some way or another to what you have to do. And I think that the more that you understand the important details of how you're going to do things, the more that will stay true when everything changes. So I like to take a ton of photos when I location scout. I like to scout, with the director and with the AD and whoever else it ends up being. But if I have the time and I have the opportunity, I love to go back on my own as well and just look at spaces at different times of day and just quietly look at spaces without having the director in your ear or the AD in the ear or the production designer. And those are all important things and things that need to be discussed. But it's nice to be able to go back to a place and just sit quietly and look at it and imagine it and think about how you might light it, or things where you might be able to put a light that you hadn't noticed before, or whatever, or just observe it and see what it looks like at that time of day, or how the light streams through it or doesn't stream through it, or shadows are probably not going to be something that you want to do, and sort of figure out how to work around it. So I take a ton of photos. I take a ton of photos that I hope might end up looking like the film, wide shots for scenes or close-ups for scenes, and then showing them to the director. And the more that you can share that stuff, I think the better that it is, because now everybody is on the same page. I like to print stuff out and put it up on walls, and so that the director can see things, and so that the production designer can see things, and so that the AD can see things, and you're all looking at the same thing now, and things are becoming more clear. So I like to do a lot of that stuff in prep, and I think that that's a really important part of moving towards shooting a project, so that everybody gets on the same page. And again, there's no real right or wrong way to do it. Whatever works for you, I think works, as long as you can translate that into a clear understanding from everybody else on the project, and that's important things. So that being said, I have a couple of boards that I've put together, which I might just share my screen here if you guys are interested. I do combinations of things. I use iPads, an iPad quite a bit for stuff. And I have a background of drawing. So sometimes I spend a long time doing storyboards, and sometimes I spend very short periods of time doing storyboards. But what I find is the most helpful is just taking stills of the location and putting those in, and then drawing on top of them. And the drawings can be as crude or as good as you have the time and patience and ability to do. But this is some storyboards from a movie called From the Vine, which we shot in Italy. And this is an opening title sequence that the director and I had sort of put together as a team. And I had boarded, because I wanted to be sure. We shot in a very small town in Italy, and the great thing about doing that is the town was incredible. They were very open to us being there, and really allowed us to be and do whatever we needed to do. And because it was small, we were able to move around very easily, and sort of, it was one of the few times that you're able to be in the right place at the right time for light. And I think that that's a big thing about scouting and planning your shoots, is looking at your locations and thinking about which way you're going to put the camera and the way that the sun travels through those spaces, and trying to build a schedule with the AD and the director, of course, in a way that works for you for lighting. And it's not something that's always a possibility for you. There's always so many other pieces of that puzzle that are going to, dictate how you may or may not do something. But here specifically, it was something that we could do because it was so easy to move around. So we put these together, and I went around town just sort of shooting photos of the places that I liked, and then sketching on top of them, and then sharing with everybody. And now, sort of everybody knows this is exactly what we're going to look at and exactly what time we're going to do things. I write a lot of these little notes and stuff on the side, or just sort of to myself more than anything. But it helps. It helps everybody get on the same page. And I think that the more your entire crew know exactly what you're going to do, then the faster that you're going to move and the more efficient it is. And I think that the more that you involve everybody in your crew with things like this too, the more excited they are about what you're doing, and the more willing they are to give you 100% on that day, and like Vinit was saying earlier too, it's like you have so many contributors and so many people that you collaborate with. It's really important to, everybody has their specific strengths and their specific purpose on set, and to be able to trust those people and work collaboratively with them. The more that you trust them, the more that they're going to trust you. And I think the better that your working relationship is going to be with them. So this is the final sequence that we end up shooting. It was just some stills from that based on the boards. And we were very lucky to be able to get around and sort of be in these places at the right time, so that we knew that the sun was always going to be sort of in the spots that we wanted to. But I think a big part of that was just being able to share these boards with everybody.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, drawing on the storyboards, that's a technique I've never really, maybe I'm just tweaking like ideas, but I definitely can't draw.
Yeah, and it's not something that you really have to be able to do. Like stickmen work just as well as anything else, I think. And my boards, I think, they really vary wildly from good to bad. And if you look at this sequence, this is from James versus His Future Self, a film that we shot up in Sudbury a few years ago with director Jeremy Lalonde. And the nice thing about being able to draw on top of the photos is it saves you from having to draw the majority of what those boards are. So the top left one, is literally just a stick figure. And I think that communicates the information that people need to know. The other ones that, certainly aren't great either, but it works. They're very quick sketches. Daniel Stern was the star in this, and that's him in the bottom right. That might be some of my best story.
A question for you, Scott. So the top left frame there, you had taken that shot as just a general scouting reference photo, or you had shot it intending to draw on it later?
That was probably something that I just shot as a reference.
I see.
With no intention of drawing on it later. Usually
Okay.
what I'll do is I'll just hose it down with my phone, and then when I sort of sit down by myself to put these boards together, I kind of go through things, and I'll have, maybe sometimes I'll know exactly the framing that I want, and other times I'll have 3 or 4 variations, and I'll sort of sit and think on them and say, okay, this is the one I like the best based on this or based on that, and choose them there. And then when I show up on the day, it's just one less thing to have to think about, because you've got 100 other things to focus on. So I enjoy doing it that way. This is the final sequence here. So you can see, oops, sorry guys. The top left board that you mentioned, that ends up being sort of this. And of course, this is once the art department gets their hands on it as well, and we dress in the pieces that we need.
Nice. Yeah, so one of the questions was, what programs do you use to draw with? But when I'm using an iPad, sometimes it's Acrobat that you can basically like add a pen tool and tweak a bunch of stuff to. Sometimes if I'm trying to get an idea across quickly, and I, on an iPad, which I use tons as well, I'll just take a screen grab, and then Apple now allows you to edit photos and change colors with a pen tool, and you can just quickly mock something up and give an idea to everyone on what your thoughts are. But Scott makes a very good point, like sharing that stuff early on with your crew and with other departments really kind of gets people on the same page, and you all kind of walk into a shoot knowing kind of what you're aiming for, and then end up tweaking from there.
Exactly. Yeah. I use an app called Procreate on the iPad, which is a pretty cool app. It's sort of like Photoshop with a built-in tablet. It's a sort of a drawing app, but it allows you to import photos, and it gives you layers the same way that Photoshop does as well, which makes it very easy to sort of draw on top of things and then write on top of things. And you can write yourself notes that you can then later turn off before you share with people about time of day or whatever, information people don't need to have, but you like to sort of include yourself. And the cool thing about that as well is then you can export it into Photoshop and as a PSD, and it includes those layers as well, which is sort of nice. So that's what I use. But I think everybody sort of there's so many things available nowadays that you can kind of use whatever you know or whatever works for you.
Exactly. Yeah, GoodNotes is another one that I've heard of. I haven't used much of that yet, but apparently you can clip certain storyboards out of another picture and reorganize and be able to like tweak very much like Scott's describing Photoshop-esque UI. So yeah, it's really whatever you can get your hands on, make work for you, I think.
Most definitely. GoodNotes is great. I use GoodNotes for reading all of my scripts. And the nice thing about that is, like you say, you can bring in stills and you can stick storyboards next to the actual scene in the script, or you can draw on top of it. You can write yourself notes. I use a color coding system that I just highlight all the scene headers, either in blue or yellow or orange, depending on if it's a night scene, a night interior, a night exterior, a day interior, a day exterior, or an evening or morning scene. I just choose my own colors that make sense to me. And then that way I can go back and just very quickly look at the script at a glance and know it's a night scene, and being a visual person, it's for me faster than reading it. So I think everybody has their own processes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. And was there a version of this before the iPad? Like, did you guys make little cutouts with some collages?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. The other thing I like to do is I have these books that every project is its own little book.
Nice.
And it's exactly that. It's what I like about these is you can throw them in your pocket and bring them onto sets with you, or on scouts or whatever. And everybody I think has their own system. The first thing I do when I start a new book is I write all of the scenes down, all the locations down, and then I put the scene numbers for those locations underneath them. And my system is, if I underline a scene number, it means it's night. And if I put a little dot on the right side underneath it, it means it's evening. And if it's on the left side, it's morning. And if it has nothing, it's day. And then I just know all the different locations that we're going to have in the movie and how many scenes we have there. And at a glance, I can look and see how many are night, how many are day, how many are evening. And then I'll break down the scenes and write myself little notes based on things. Sometimes I'll put little drawings or stills or whatever into it as a reference for what I want. And then this was a movie called The Righteous, which was a lot of religious connotations. So I put a cross on the front of it, but they're literally my Bibles, and they come with me to set, they come with me to scout. And if I'm ever trying to remember quickly what I had intended or planned on the day, then it comes out of my pocket, and suddenly I remember. It's just...
Scott, you didn't teach me this. You're saving all the good stuff for the live.
Talk more about this. Yeah, talk more about this.
Yeah, it's interesting because we often get caught up in the technology and what's new and available to use. And, you start being like, okay, well, I need an iPad to do this or that, where in fact, we could really simplify it and just use pen and paper a lot of the time, and not really overthink anything, and just do the work, right?
Exactly. And it's what works for you. There's no right or wrong way. It's just, whatever you have accessible, or however your brain might work, and do it that way.
Exactly. Pen and paper for sure has been really important. I also find like when you're on pen and paper, you have less distractions. An iPad, the second you turn it on, there's like 50 notifications that you have to deal with. Every department yelling at you because you haven't given them an answer yet.
Yeah.
I find half the time I open my phone to do something and something else distracts me, and then I'm holding it 5 minutes later going, why did I even have this? Why did I pick this up?
Yeah.
100%. I could talk about a little bit of the like mood boards or certain things I've put together for shoots. Yeah, in advertising, I mean, there are storyboards that are not really like, not anything set in stone, but you want to be able to like, I think very quickly for me, I want to start establishing the language of like how this thing is going to look. And so one job I did a few years back, I'm just going to pull it up now, 1 second here. See if I can get this sharing again. I had a very interesting job with Gary Shore. He was the director, and it was a Nissan spot that we did that wanted to have like a very Blade Runner look.
Mm.
And let me just pull it up. There we go.
Cool.
So yeah, this job was a car spot, and it really wanted to have a futuristic vibe, because one of the features the car had was that it could self-drive or keep lane assist, if you will. And so, I saw an early version of the director's treatment where he was talking about, adding a very colorful nighttime feel to the spot. And I really wanted to do the job. And so I put together this mood board as fast as I could, because usually in advertising, you're getting hired in a split second, or someone else is taking your job. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I quickly scoured the internet for like things that would look cool. And one of the things we were going to do was shoot underneath the gardener. And I was excited just knowing the architecture that we have here in Toronto. It's basically like we have Lakeshore that runs underneath the gardener, which is our highway on top. And we wanted to light up the pillars and actually get something unique happening. And there was a lot of conversations about exactly how we were going to do that, because being a commercial, and I think at the time it was like a couple of days that we were shooting, maybe 2 or 3, but this was a big, enormous lighting setup that we had to do, and there wasn't going to be a ton of time to, or crew, like on a long form job where you might have like a day to prep this stuff. We were doing it pretty much on the day. So we had a pre-call, and we had to come up with an idea of how this thing was actually going to be lit and as fast as possible. So on the Tech Scout day, we ended up I suggested, okay, why don't we bring par cans? Cost was another factor in this. So there was like, we were going to bring par cans and gel them. That was one idea. Or we were going to try to get our hands on a bunch of sky panels, which at the time they were still very new and ultra rare in the city, and very expensive to rent. But that prep, I think it was a great thing that we actually brought the lights with us, because we knew, or like, I should say, if we had chosen the wrong approach, it would have been a really costly mistake. Just because, one, it wouldn't look good, but secondly, you have a crew that is running around trying to run a bunch of lights that are pointing up, color them, and make them work for what we need as quickly as possible. So in the end, when we were on the on the scout day, we could throw up both options. You know, basically we did a couple of pillars. I think it was like 2 or 3 with par cans, and we shot them straight up. But it had a very, you know, sourcey, angled look. And then we brought sky panels and kind of did them on a few other pillars further down, and then drove to the other end and basically had a look. And immediately the sky panels were the winner. But for that reason alone, like, you know, the producer was on us saying that par cans are the only thing you're going to get. And when we were able to show them live that this was a better option, they quickly jumped to it. And maybe I can share the spot too. Let's see how video turns out. It's only 30 seconds, so I hope you can all stay for it.
Jack Spencer was on a mission. Chaos surrounded him. But Jack had a secret weapon. Nissan Pro Pilot Assist. With the push of a button, the line between man and machine was blurred.
Thank you, Father.
The 2018 Nissan Rogue with Pro Pilot Assist, semi-autonomous driving technology available today.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah, so this was kind of, you know, you can see some of the flavors of those stills kind of coming across in this spot. I'm just trying to find the gardener here. So we did end up lighting up these pillars, and post helped us a little bit with, you know, these kind of brighter concrete things, I guess, essentially. But yeah, it was another great opportunity to, like, in prep, be able to discuss and show people practically, which I think is sometimes ultra important, especially when, you know, you have an idea that you don't regularly do. It's not like I'm lighting up the gardener every night, but you want to try something to kind of show examples of like where you think it can go.
Very cool.
Just a question I had. So in a situation like that, when you're doing the test day, you're paying, there is a cost of using those fixtures for the prep day, right? A smaller amount of fixtures, is that right?
Yeah, usually. I think in this particular one, the rental house was willing to play ball because they knew that we were just gonna test. So they allowed us to take a few items, knowing full well that they were getting the rental of whatever decision we made.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes there is a cost, but like nowadays it's amazing. Like you can buy so many little lights like straight off Amazon that are multicolor, changeable, whatever. And at least it gives people an idea of like the language that you're thinking about. And you don't have to like necessarily have the specific tool per se.
Okay.
I think if there's like a certain color you want to convey, or this was kind of, I mean, we had the opportunity because it was like, I mean, you know, a sizable commercial, and one way or another, we were renting something for the situation. So we were just able to get it for free.
Cool.
Very cool. It's a great looking spot. I remember seeing that spot before and liking the way that it looked. So I didn't realize that you shot it. Very cool.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
They're asking us to give our final thoughts. I guess this is going to end soon.
Okay, that's fast.
Yeah, it did go by fast.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on your experience being a mentor and mentees. We'd love to, yeah, definitely, I think, talk about our experiences. Maybe I'll start. I think because I didn't really get an opportunity to have someone to mentor under directly, and now, you know, like with the pandemic and kind of the state of the world on how we're trying to help other people come up through the industry, especially like Black, people of color, Indigenous, so on and so forth. I think this has been a really fantastic time when we can get more of those people talking one-on-one with other people of color, or you know, industry professionals in general. And I think that it's, you know, like like we've said earlier in this conversation, like film is such a collaborative process. You're always going to be working with people, and you're always going to be learning something from every single set that you go on, whether it be small or massive budget, doesn't matter. I think because it's such a collaborative process, you know, the key grip and gaffer that I work with, they also work with other DPs in the industry, and those DPs have their own approaches to things. And sometimes we share those ideas and thoughts, and like indirectly, I'm learning something from another DP friend of mine, even though I haven't spoken to them directly. So I think, you know, don't be shy about asking questions. There's never really the wrong question. I think the same question can be asked to a number of different people, and you'll get a bunch of different perspectives on it. And you should just take what it is that you want out of that information that you receive.
Most definitely. Yeah. That's great, man. I'm just so happy to be a part of this. And I'm happy that it's the CSC that's doing it. It's great that lots of other people are doing it as well, but for cinematography especially, it's hard to get, like the Canadian Film Center, which is such a great place for people to come up through. They don't have a cinematography program per se. It's a great place to go and shoot stuff when you're, you know, at a certain point, I think too. But for it to be coming from the source, and it to be sort of like the fundamental group of cinematographers in the country working together to do this sort of thing, it's an amazing place for it to come from. But I couldn't be happier to be a part of it. And certainly, you know, I think we've been sort of given a loose timeline for it. But like I said to Howard in the past, I hope it's the kind of thing where, you know, we've got a new relationship now, and I think it's wonderful. And I want it to extend beyond that. And I want to help for a long time and see your career blossom, Howard, as well as everybody else's. And yeah, just I think it's a great thing for sure.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. I had obviously known about the CSC for a long time, but I only became a member this year to be part of this mentorship program. And yeah, it's been great. It's been great so far, and it's been super worthwhile for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile mentioning that there aren't that many programs like this. And I'm happy that the CSC was able to offer something like that. And especially for people of color, because oftentimes it's very intimidating to go up into like a full shoot of a lot of white people. And it can be very intimidating and very hard to break through. But yeah, I'm learning so much from Vinit right now, and even the other DPs that I work with as a grip or gaffer. And it's always worthwhile asking the same questions, like Vinit said, to different DPs, and you'll be surprised as to like how many answers and different approaches everybody has. And that sort of informs how you want to work and how you want to approach the industry and your work in general.
Awesome.
Amazing.
All right.
Well, we'll be seeing you guys on some film sets soon enough, I hope.
Oh yeah.
Well, definitely. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing all you guys in person, hopefully in the
Soon, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully this was enlightening for the people out there watching too.
Yeah, and I would love to add, actually, the CSC Instagram page gives 2 weeks to different DPs in the roster. And I've learned a ton from all these DPs that share their process, all their work that they're working on, or whatever notes they have. And it's super, super enlightening to just know how people work and function and how they approach different situations. So it's definitely worthwhile following and reading up on what other DPs are doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I also love seeing it. It's great.
Yeah.
It is. It really makes the community stronger. I think we really have to put the time into this. Anyone that's involved with the CSC, I think, now's the time where it's really getting its chance to shine, and we should really take advantage of that.
Totally.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, what a pleasure talking to you all.
Yeah. Scott, pleasure meeting you. I hope we get cross paths at one point.
Likewise. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Scott, and nice seeing you again, Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope that we see each other in person as well
I
sometime
hope
very
so.
soon.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Ciao
Awesome.
for now. Enjoy your Sunday.
Be
Yeah.
safe. Take care of yourselves, guys. All the best.
Yeah.